Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel. My name is Jampamain, and today I'm going to show you a thing that I did. See, recently the other day I made a fascinating discovery that I suck at chess. You know, growing up and playing chess with my family on a chessboard, I thought I was pretty good, you know? But then I started playing chess on the internet, and oh boy was I mistaken. I thought to myself, how can I salvage this situation without damaging my pride? So I cheated and created a chess bot. There's a chess robot that exists called Stockfish, and it's really good at playing chess. It's the default chess engine for chess.com. It looks ahead like 25 moves into the future to figure out which move is the best one. The thing is, I don't know how to make something like that. So I thought to myself, what if you made a chess robot that only made random moves? That way, you can just rely on probability to make the best moves for you. Since technically, there is a universe out there where every single random move is the best move to make. I tried it out on chess.com, and let me tell you, it did not go well. Turns out, there are more terrible moves that you can make than there are good ones. It took me a while to get to the rank where it was actually even possible for me to win, but I got there eventually. That rank is rank 100, and it's the lowest you can go on chess.com. Now I'm going to show you 3 games today that I played using my random chess bot. And I know it may surprise you to hear this, but all 3 of these games I won. And I didn't win by checkmate. I won because my opponent ran out of time. Starting with this game, my opponent and I each have 1 minute on the clock. Now the bot here is in white, and I will be calling him Steve. Steve begins with the bird opening, and then black develops his knight. Some normal development here until Steve plays b3. Now, b3 is a bad move because it allows black to just capture the free pawn. Black, however, decides to move their queen to h4. Steve plays g3 because it's literally the only move it can make. Black moves the queen out of the way, and then Steve plays d4. Now black decides to start capturing Steve's pieces, beginning with f4. Steve does nothing about this by playing b4. Black again captures to g3. Steve does nothing about this. Not only does he do nothing about this, but he allows the bishop to now capture that pawn on b4. Now black decides to move the knight to d4. Steve attacks the queen, makes an excellent move. Black decides to use the knight to put Steve in check. However, there are many ways out of this. Steve decides to use the pawn to attack the queen and kill the knight. There's that bishop move I was telling you about. Steve moves the king out of the way. Not a good move. Could have just defended with the bishop. Now, queen takes, and finally Steve decides to put the queen in front, and black runs out of time. Probably because black didn't want to trade queens. Now, for the second game, Steve begins with the where opening. Black develops into the center of the board, and Steve goes f3. Now, f3 is not a good move because it blocks the knight and the bishop from developing. Good development from black here. Steve decides to attack the bishop, and black moves away. Now, Steve moves the knight out onto the board. Not the center of the board. He goes to a3. Not a good move. You really want to put your knight onto the center usually. Now, this move begins a series of misses and blunders from both Steve and black. I'll show you what I'm talking about. So we got f5. Queen e2. Now that's the only good move for a while here. Ready? c4, c4 take, f4, e6, h4, bishop e7, and d4. Now, we're not done yet. King d7, rook h2, bishop b4, and queen d2. Now, this is obviously terrible because they can just take. However, black decides not to do that. Black wants to move their own queen out onto the board, and you can see the evaluation bar just shot up there for Steve. Because now Steve can just take the bishop, and Steve's in a much better position. However, Steve obviously doesn't do that because Steve is making random moves. So Steve decides to move the rook up one more spot. Now, black captures the queen, and Steve decides to capture back. Now we got queen moving back into its corner, and rook to c2. Now, That's going to be a funny move later on. Well, actually, it's going to be the next move. Just watch. Ready? So black is going to move its pawn to c3, and Steve is just going to move the knight right back, because I guess Steve didn't want to put the knight there in the first place. So now we got pawn captures bishop. King's going to move over. Queen's going to move into place here. Steve decides to develop the bishop. Queen captures, forking the rook and the knight. Steve moves his bishop back. Queen takes. King moves out of the way. That's check. And Steve captures with the rook, which is a really good move because it's putting the rook onto the playing field. Now, that's a bad move because the rook can just take the queen. However, Steve doesn't do that because, again, he's making random moves. So Steve instead decides to move the rook forward to e5. There's the queen moving back to the spot that it was. It actually forks these two pawns, which is a good move. Now, Steve decides not to do anything about it. He just wants to move his pawns, right? So queen takes the knight there. That was free. I'm going to move the king. These are all good moves. That's check. Defend. Could have just taken that, but didn't. So let's see. Just moving pawns, because that's really all Steve has at this point. Pawn moves. Queen moves back. Pawn moves forward. Bishop. King moves. Now you can see Steve's in trouble here because we have these three pieces that are creating kind of a really ominous threat for Steve. But again, Steve won this game, and you'll see why in a minute. Steve's just going to keep pushing pawns. That's not check yet. I mean, that's just jeopardizing this piece right here. But and Steve actually moves to defend, which is good move, Steve. Now, that's check. So Steve moves the king to f4. There's check again. However, this is a bad move because it ignores this fork right here. It forces Steve to go here, and then that have to go there, and then finally checkmate. So Steve moves out of the way. That's check. Moves out of the way, moving the knight. Now here's an interesting thing. Black moves the queen to e3. Now, that's a free queen. Once Steve will take, black will take Steve, and that's, according to the engine, that's better for black. And that's actually what Steve does. Steve decides to capture a queen. Out of all the moves that Steve could have made, it decided to capture the queen. Granted, there's not that many pieces and not that many moves. So, it made a good move. This is what I'm saying. And so black captures. Now Steve has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pawns and 1 bishop to work with here. So it's going to be moving the king a lot. So we got horse. It's going to march its pawns forward. Then we got a knight move, marching its pawns, capture the pawns. And that pawn for Steve is really close to promoting. However, it gets denied almost immediately. Now this one's getting close to promoting. So let's see what happens. It's going to move, the black moves the rook. Like, the engine is saying that that's a good move, but it's a minus 70. So I don't. So check, move out of the way. And now this is checkmate in 1 right here. However, black doesn't see that. Black just wants to get the bishop. So that's what it does. It captures the bishop and misses the checkmate. So there's a king move. Let's check. Move the king. Check again. Move the king. Not check again. So that it frees Steve to move pawns. There's the knight move. And Steve captures a knight with the king. And there's another knight move. And there's a pawn move. That's check. Move out of the way. That's check. Move out of the way. And this leaves the knight free for capture. However, Steve decides to promote the queen instead. And it's not killed immediately, surprisingly. Let's check and capture the vulnerable knight. Steve is making some pretty good moves here. If you'll notice, black has 0.3 seconds left and Steve moves out of the way. So there's that game. Steve was able to promote a queen, surprisingly. Didn't do anything with it, though. All right, this time, Steve is playing black. Now, white begins with d4. Now we got e6, d4, and black goes h5. Now, white is developing, and Steve puts white in check. Just completely randomly puts him in check. Kicks the bishop out, except Steve doesn't do anything about it. It just sacrifices the bishop and moves the king forward. However, they don't kill the bishop. I don't know why they don't kill the bishop. They don't kill the bishop. They decide to move their own bishop here. Now, we got attack on the bishop, kind of. I mean, that's pretty good, Steve. But white decides to move away. Now, if white's not going to kill Steve's bishop, Steve's just going to kill white's pawn. So that's what Steve does, and then it gets captured. Now Steve is moving pawns, and white moves the queen to b3. Steve gets this line movement ready. White moves the bishop, and black develops the knight to f6. Now, white moves the knight to e5, and black moves the pawn. Now, this situation is becoming increasingly more hairy for Steve. You'll see why in a minute. Now, black goes f7 knight, forking the rook and the queen. Steve responds by doing absolutely nothing about it. So white went ahead and captured Steve's queen. Steve moves the knight to help defend, and white g4. Now here is not a good situation for Steve, and you can see the evaluation bar is 100% in favor for white. Now this is mate in 2. So first, white moves the queen e6. Now black has two options. It can either go and kill the knight, or it can go into that square. It doesn't matter which one it does, because it's still checkmate in 2. Steve goes there, then queen can go there, and that's checkmate because defended by the knight. If Steve goes there, then white can go here, defended by the bishop. That's checkmate. However, white doesn't see that and moves the queen for check. Quick and easy check. Steve blocks with the pawn. Now, queen starts to annihilate all of Steve's pieces. We got a rook movement from Steve, a bishop movement from white, and rook moves. Now this is mate in 2, and I'll show you how. Queen to d7, king to f8, queen to f7, checkmate. White doesn't see that, decides to take the free rook. Now this is still mate in 2 here, with the same strategy that I showed you earlier. Now this is mate in 2, still mate in 2. And now this is mate in 1 with bishop f6, checkmate. However, white doesn't see that, moves the bishop out of the way. Now this is still mate in 1. This is still mate in 1 right here. But doesn't see it. Decides to check the king. And we got a series of moves here. Steve is in critical danger at all times here, and white just does not see it. Okay, mate in 5, mate in 3, mate in 5, mate in 3. Now white has 20 seconds on the board. So white goes check, Steve moves out of the way. White goes not check, Steve moves the pawn, check. Steve blocks with the rook, and white misses mate in 1 here, which is kill the rook with the queen. However, white doesn't kill the rook with the queen. Right, white kills the rook with the bishop. And so now this is mate in 2 for white. Puts the king in check. And now this is mate in 1 for white with 10 seconds left. Mate in 1 right here. That's all white has to do. And white decides to go a7. So black moves out of the way. Still checkmate in 1. Still checkmate in 1. However, white goes here. 5 seconds left. Okay. Steve goes back to where it was. It's the only move that Steve can make. And white goes, misses the checkmate in 1. Again misses the checkmate in 1. This is checkmate in 1. And white goes a7 again. 4 seconds left. Steve goes back to where it was. White goes a4. Okay. Check. Steve just moves out of the way. This is mate in 2 for white, but white only has 2 seconds left. So, c7 check. Steve goes d5. And the saddest of all, white runs out of time with an option for checkmate in 1. And that is the story of the chess robot that I made. I lost a lot of games up to this point, and I don't want to show all of them because it'll take way too long. But if you make completely random moves, you can win. It is possible. It's just not very likely. That's the end of this video, guys. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed that, go ahead and watch another one of my videos. It's up on the screen somewhere. You can go ahead and click that or not. You can do whatever you want to.